They move it up over the line. A long pass by Mikhailov didn't work. Cleared in front of the net on the boards. And Philadelphia, two-man break again. A breakaway. He's going waiting on goal. Goal! Beautiful goal by the Leafs. Terrific.
Pretty good job of interference run, too, by Gary Dornhofer, but Rick McLeish is an excellent shooter. Not too often, Dennis, you'll see the Soviets get caught like this. Here it comes. What's the interference on the part of the one flyer right there as he moves over at the line. Here's McLeish. Perfect spot.
Everybody, it's Isaiah, just reminding you that FlyersNittyGritty.com and the O&B Puckcast are brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. Hey, do you have damage to your home? Not sure who to call? We suggest that you call Summit Public Adjusters before your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be very stressful. Let Summit take the stress out of the claims process. From storm damage to your roof, to toilet overflows, to broken pipes and fires, Summit gets you the most money for your repairs. So next time Mother Nature leaves you in need of repairs, call Summit Public Adjusters at 215-752-0560 or visit SummitPublicAdjusters.com. Again, Summit Public Adjusters, you can reach them at 215-752-0560 or just visit Summit with 1T, publicadjusters.com. Licensed in PA and New Jersey. Okay, and we are back. It's Isaiah, and you are listening to the O&B Puckcast, episode number 117, brought to you by FlyersNittyGritty.com. And we hope to have a full panel tonight. I know I'm joined by the great Dan Silver. Dan, how are you, man?
I'm good, Isaiah. How are you doing?
All right. We hope to have Chef on board very soon. But before we do that, let's not keep our special guest waiting tonight. He is the Flyers pre-intermission and post-game host. And, of course, you know him from Flyers Daily and the Flyers Broadcast Network. He is Jason Myrtetus. How you doing, man?
What's going on, boys?
Man, a lot of playoff hockey and a lot of anticipation for this offseason right afterwards.
I love watching I love the playoffs no matter what, whether the Flyers are in it or not. But I love the painful part about watching every playoff game and seeing Flyer fans tweet out that they could never compete with any of those teams in the playoffs because those teams in the playoffs look so different. But when you do a side-by-side comparison of regular season hockey to playoff hockey, it's totally different. And the only way you can look like that is if you're in the playoffs. That's the only time that desperation comes.
I'm so glad you said that because I was going to talk about that during the show, is that I see all these Flyers fans saying exactly what you said, and it's completely different in the playoffs. Like, yeah, the Flyers obviously didn't play well enough to make it into the playoffs. However, if they had, they wouldn't be getting destroyed. Even this version of the Flyers team wouldn't be losing 10-0 to these teams. It's just not how it works. So I do find that a little bit funny as well.
Yeah, it's people look at it and they go, look at these playoffs. We are light years away. And whether they're light years away or not, it's irrelevant for this conversation. You can say that about every team that's not in the playoffs because they don't look like a playoff team because they haven't. The game changes so much in the playoffs. Like little things that you can get away with, without back pressure on a rush up into the offensive zone with no back pressure because guys, in playoff games there's back pressure every time. Guys spill it. They're fighting tooth and nail to get back into position and break up plays, and you don't get away with that stuff in the playoffs. And when you're in the playoffs, everybody does it. So,
yeah, it seems like it. I'll tell you what, though. In 2 out of the last 3 seasons, the Flyers look like, I mean, you always show flashes of, like, especially in big games, important games, where you're kind of fighting for your playoff life or something like that. You see, like, hey, I can see him ramping up the intensity. I didn't see that this year at all. So I am guilty of saying the Flyers don't look like they have that combination of speed, skill, and tenacity, grit, whatever, to compete in the playoffs. Obviously, they're out of the playoffs 2 of the last 3 years. But, yeah, I mean, it's obvious. It's a different game. Even last year when they were getting their outplayed, I mean, they didn't look like they were being skated off the ice.
Well, see, a lot of people think they did, though. They go, well, they got dominated by the Islanders. Well, playoff hockey is really tight for the most part, right? They're 1-goal games. It's tooth and nail. I mean, look how the Islanders won that game against Boston, Game 4, right? You get some goals. Look at Winnipeg, or not Winnipeg. Was it the Winnipeg? No, who came back down 1 and ended up winning 3-2 the other night? Was that? I can't remember which game. Oh, it was Vegas.
Vegas, right.
Watching the Vegas game, right? Like they're down 2-1. They dominate the whole game, but they're down a goal in the third. And then they come back and they get, a goal off the back of Grubauer, which was an incredible goal. And then they get the deflection goal to go ahead. And you go, that's what playoff hockey is. But, when you watch the team this year, you go, okay, there's a reason why they're not in the playoffs. They were just so bad defensively. And then, it's when you get into the playoffs, it's like basketball becomes a half-court game, and every possession matters. Well, every puck possession matters in the playoffs in the NHL. And it's funny because you can be really bad one year, and you can spin it around really quick in the NHL. I mean, we've seen it 06-07. Flyers were the worst team in the league. They came back, they went to a conference final with a couple of really savvy moves. Now, were they earth-shattering moves, getting Chemo? He was a huge piece, obviously. But Scott Hartnell at that time, nice player, first-round pick, nice player. But the pieces fit together, and some of the savvy moves they made turned them from the worst team, bar none, the year before, into a conference final team the next year. So it can turn around real quick in this league because the difference between teams from the top of the league to the bottom is not that great. And the sport lends to that in the way it's played as well. Yeah,
no, I can definitely. Add Brienne into that. What was really key that year, just not to dwell on that too much, the emergence of a young player like Mike Richards. If you could find that player, like maybe that extra player that has a kind of year that Farabee had, you add a player or two from the youth core that we have, and then it blends in with some of the newer pieces, and then you have a replay of 08, and that's what the Flyers need, at least, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, what the needs, we all know what the needs are, and we know what the number one, and I imagine we'll talk about it quite a bit, is, the right shot, right side, top pair defenseman to put alongside Ivan Provorov. I mean, that's the biggest need. You also need, pending what happens this offseason, who Vegas takes, and, what happens with Nolan Patrick, you also need a top 9 forward. You also need a little bit of size and accountability, a player that brings accountability to the opposition out there, because they lack that right now. You need to improve your depth, and I'm talking about looking at guys like Nicolas Aube-Kubel. Is he a guy that you bring back into that role where he did not have a good year? Those are some of the questions that they have to answer. And while they're not as important as a right shot, right pair, top pairing defenseman, they are still important, because you have to build a team. I did a whole episode last week on this on Flyers Daily, and I had Brent Flair on, and I talked to him about it last week as well. The notion of team building, like gathering talent's great, and having talent's great, but it doesn't matter if the talent doesn't fit, and it doesn't matter if your team, if the talent doesn't fit your system or complement each other as players. You look at a team like Tampa Bay a couple of years ago, 121 points in the regular season, ran away with the President's Trophy, knocked out in the first round. We saw it with Washington for years. President's Trophy, best team in the league, first place, get knocked out. You got to build a team that's going to make the playoffs comfortably, but what you really want to do, you don't need to be a number 1 seed. You need to build a team that can have success in the playoffs. And that's different than building a team that has success in the regular season. Just ask the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that came up, Bob Clark was on a podcast with Urs Kinderchuk's son, Zach, and he talked about how kind of depressing it was to watch the team, and especially with regard to
forging an identity? Do they have an identity? And that kind of dovetails with what you're talking about with regard to building a team and team building in general. And that seems to be a kind of theme since the Carter Richards trades. Yeah, won the trades, a lot of talent back in the hall, but they never really fit together. And now you look at them and like they need shooters, they need this, they need that, they need grit, toughness, speed. But it's really, you're trying to create a synergy, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to create a couple of things. You're right, though. You got to create a group that fits together on and off the ice. Now, I don't care if they like each other, and they're going out to dinners. That doesn't matter. It's how they hold each other accountable and all those elements. And I know what Bob was talking about. I talk about it all the time. A team without an identity is a team that's not going to win. It's just not going to. They had an identity this year. It just wasn't a good identity. It was, not playing high hockey IQ offense and making mental mistake after mental mistake. And whatever you want to say the reasoning was, whether COVID, I mean, it was a part of it. That's real. But for the most part, these are things that can't happen, especially with the group that they had. And, they need to figure out what their organizational DNA is. I think that's first and foremost. They had it for years, right? It was the Broad Street Bullies, rough and tumble, that whole thing. And we all agreed it was time to turn the page on that. But I think they've course corrected a little too much. Like they grabbed the steering wheel and pulled it a little too hard to the other side because now they have none of it. And I'm not saying you need to have guys that can fight, but you need to have some size. Look at all the teams that are having success. They got some guys out there. For Tampa, it was Barclay Goodrow and Blake Coleman and Pat Maroon. You see, they all have guys out there that are going to give that element of the game in a playoff because you need them to wear down an opponent in a 7-game series and to have that accountability to protect your skilled players, the guys that need to carry the mail from a point perspective. So they got to figure out what they want to be, and then they got to get the right players to be it. Now, I think Chuck kind of intimated at that in his press conference right after the trade deadline, that was an evaluation period from there to the end of the year to figure out who's part of the problem, who's part of the solution. And if you're not part of the solution, you got to go. And I think that he's going to be very aggressive this offseason in accomplishing that and putting his stamp, if you will, on this roster. Because he's really only made one substantial move. I mean, Niskanen was a decent move, and it obviously paid off for the year until he retired. But, I mean, really the only substantial move he made was the signing of Kevin Hayes, who had a down year. So I think that he's looking to really put his fingerprints on this roster and this franchise this offseason where, last year there wasn't a lot of movement. There was the flat cap heading into an expansion year season, and there was a lot of unknown variables. Now we have a lot more knowns. We know the new TV deal, the new teams coming in, the expansion draft will be in the books. And I think there's a whole glut of pent-up demand to make trades and make moves happen because teams didn't get a chance to reset their roster last year. They'll get a chance to reset it this summer. And I think there'll be a lot of movement, and there'll be a lot of movement for the Flyers as well.
Yep. Yeah, I can see that. Now, Chef, if you have joined us, you can go and ask a question if we can get you.
Okay, my question is, I know you were talking about an identity and building a team, and you were talking about the need for that right D and the other needs that this team needs. How many needs does this team have? Is this, and you talk about aggressive, and I was looking at flipping, you got to flip at least five forwards, get a 1B goalie, and possibly changing half your defensive core to make it a significant turnaround. I know you said Fletcher, you think he's going to be aggressive. How aggressive do you think he's going to be? Is it that much?
I think that what you just described is a little, dare I say, aggressive. First of all, I don't think that they need to flip around that much. I think that, you're basing it on this season, and I understand why. It was a shit year. But when you look at it, just the year before, they were a really good team. So you don't need to flip it around that much. But you need to be strategic in what you flip. Now, you have a lot of boxes you got to check. Okay, so we know about the top pair right side, right shot defenseman. We know that you have some big questions in regards to, adding a shooter. People like to say a sniper. I don't want a sniper. I want a shooter. Snipers like Laine, like he's a mutt. Flyer fans think, they have problems with a guy like Nolan Patrick because he doesn't look like he's giving effort. Where do you get a close up look at Patrick Laine when he's not scoring? He doesn't give a rat's ass. So you need to score. You need some defense help. You need to get some size and some grit. You need a backup goaltender, like you said, and you have to have some physical presence. But the addition of one player can check 3 of those boxes. It doesn't take one player per box. If you get, say, Dougie Hamilton makes it to free agency, and you're able to sign him, maybe that's pie in the sky. I have no idea. I don't even know if he's going to make it to free agency. But if you get him, now all of a sudden you have a top pair, right side, right shot defenseman that can play 25 minutes a night, can drive offense, can work on your power play and your penalty kill, and he brings size and physicality. Okay, you've just checked what, 4 or 5 boxes? He improves your 5-on-5. He improves your top pair. He improves your power play. He improves your PK, and he gives you physical presence. That's one player that just checked 5 boxes that you need. So this notion of turning over 5 forwards, you're going to lose one, obviously, and I think it's going to be a forward that ends up going to Vegas, whether that's JVR or Jake.
You mean Seattle, right?
Or Seattle, yeah. I'm still stuck in Vegas. But then, so that's one right there. And I think you're going to see a couple of, substantial trades that happen. And, to acquire players. I think you're looking at maybe 4 players that they turn over total on the team, maybe 5 total. And that includes the goalie, because I don't think that Brian Elliott's coming back. But that's a lot of change for an NHL team. That's a lot of change. It really is. I mean, you're talking about, 25% of your roster at that point. That's a lot. And if the change is done strategically and with an identity and team building in mind and done, you don't make moves to make moves just to make moves because they sucked. You make moves because they'll improve your team both now and long term. And I think that, that's easier said than done. But that's what they need to make happen this offseason. I know they're going to try and make that happen, but trying's not good enough. They need to make that happen.
I have a quick question, a quick follow-up to that. What's the chance of them getting 2 defensemen? I know that's been on the Flyers fans' wish list. Maybe getting, if they don't get Hamilton, maybe Jones and somebody else, or along those lines. Is it a possibility they actually can pick up 2 defensemen?
Absolutely. Yeah, I do. I think that's absolutely a positive, a possibility of happening. Again, it depends on what happens in the expansion drafts, who you lose. And it also depends on any other deal that you make. If you make a deal, if the Flyers make a deal for Jones, they're going to want a defenseman in that deal. So you're going to lose another one, right? So say that they're going to want Sanheim in that trade package. I would try to push them towards Myers, but either way, you're losing one of those guys in your top 4. So you're going to need another top 4. Do they have a top 4 here already that can play alongside Sanheim or play alongside Myers? I don't know. They might have to go out and find that guy. Maybe that's, an older guy, a veteran like David Savard. Maybe something like that makes sense. Or you look around the league and you find some other answers to that, not along the same lines as Seth Jones, because obviously he's going to eat a lot of cap once his deal is up. But, yeah, absolutely. I think they can find 2 defensemen. I think you need to probably grab a top 6 forward or at least a top 9 forward. I don't know that that's a center, because part of the equation here is what's going to happen with Nolan Patrick. And even if Nolan Patrick's not here, is Morgan Frost ticketed for that 3C role to start out? They want to play him at center more than they want to play him on the wing. And they might have the opportunity to do that if Nolan Patrick is not here anymore. So I think that those are all part of it. And then when it comes to the goalie part of it, I mean, I had somebody kind of that I was going back and forth with that I really trusted. I said, which way do they go here? Do they go with a guy like James Reimer, who's 33, was a starter, can still give you quality games, both, once every 5 games or 4 games, or if your goaltender if Carter Hart were to get hurt or wasn't playing well, could carry it for you for 2 to 3 weeks without having to worry about his workload. And the person said, yeah, that's an option, and that's certainly one that they'll consider. But the other option that you could go with is you could go with a young guy like Jonas Korpisalo, and go, hey, you're both here. Whoever's playing better gets the crease, and use that to push each other. So we'll see which way they go. But there's 2 options and 2 directions they could go in. I don't know which one, if the veteran one has a 60-40 preference for them, or if it's 50-50, I don't know. But I think those are the 2 options, and those are 2 names that I would look out for.
Yep. Corpusalo. Give me option B, Dan.
So I kind of wanted to, Chef brought it up, but I wanted to do kind of a deeper dive on Seth Jones and a few things on him, just because obviously that's been a very hot topic since he came out and said, he wanted to look at his options after next season, and basically said, he doesn't want to keep playing in Columbus. So there's been a big debate on, the eye test versus analytics, because he was literally one of the worst defensemen in the league this year based on analytics. Obviously that's not reality. But it's led to a lot of conversations about some of the things that he's not very good at and that he hasn't been good at over the last few years, in terms of, defending zone entries. And we know what he does bring to the table. But so first, I'm kind of interested in where you stand on Seth Jones, and if you think he just needs to be out of Columbus and a fresh start. So that's the first thing about Jones. The second thing is, what kind of package, and you mentioned Sanheim or Myers, but I've also heard kind of people all over the map with him that if you're basically trading for a rental, how much exactly are you going to give up, which leads into the third part, which is, would you trade for him if there wasn't a deal in place, if there wasn't an extension in place? And if so, how much would that impact what you would give up? So, basically overall, just kind of interested in your thoughts on Jones vis-a-vis those things.
All right, let's start backwards. Let's start with your last question first. I would be interested, but obviously the package is much different. I would imagine Columbus is going to try and maximize their return, so they're going to allow any team that's in serious interest the ability to talk to the agent, because that just yields them a bigger return. And what does it hurt them by not exploring an extension prior to the trade? They're going to lose them anyway, so you might as well lose them. And they know that Seth Jones is willing to extend there, because that ups the package for them. So I would imagine that they will grant that ability for any team to have conversations with the agent on what it would take to get it done. That's number one. So yeah, I would be interested, but would I do it if I knew that he was saying, okay, I want to get to free agency, this is a rental, I got a year to woo him, like Toronto Raptors did with Kawhi, but I still may lose him. Well, I'd still be interested, yeah, and I would try and woo him and do the best I could, but my package is not going to be the same as if I know that I'm going to be able to retain the player. That's number one. Number two, what would the package look like to get him? Well, let's go under the assumption that they do feel like they're going to talk to the agent and they have a good chance of re-signing him. Bill Meltzer and I talked about this. I think it looks something like a Travis Konechny. They're going to ask for Farabee. But that would be not a non-starter. I don't think anybody's untouchable on this team, and certainly a top pairing right side defenseman is more valuable than a winger that's had a decent start to his career, a good start. But probably a Travis Konechny and either a Sanheim or a Myers, a first round pick this year, and maybe a conditional, pick the following year. I think that's what the package looks like. Maybe like a Brink or something, a first round pick and a Bobby Brink or something like that too. I think that's the package, and I would be willing to do it because, again, I'm solving my biggest problem, and one of the areas in this league that if you're not good, that you're totally screwed. Let's look year to year of the top pairing, Provorov and Niskanen, and they had the really good season. Against Alexander Ovechkin in the 4 games, he didn't have a single point, was -4. That year, the top line of Boston, the perfection line with Marchand, Pasternak, and Bergeron, had minuscule numbers against the Flyers. And the Flyers kind of split with them that season. And you look at teams, the only team that they struggled with was the Islanders in the regular season with that pairing as the top pair. PK was better as well. Then this year without Niskanen and this floating top pair of somebody with Provorov, look what happened. Ovechkin ran them off the ice, just destroyed them. The Pasternak, Marchand, Bergeron line destroyed them. I don't even need to get to the Rangers and Zibanejad and what he did to them. And then the penalty kill. So the difference of the importance of the position compared to a winger that has scored 24 goals twice, one time in a shortened season in Konechny, it's apples to tennis rackets, the difference of what you need. And then the first part of your question about what I think of him as a player. Yeah, I know the analytics, and I looked at him, and and they're not wrong. Analytics are what they are. They're an equation. There's a little bit of, I guess, how you judge a zone entry or defending a zone. There's some, parts of that are left up to discretion. But overall, his analytics the last couple of years in particular have been really poor. But then again, look at the team. So let's do that same comparison with Ivan Provorov. How has he looked this past season when the team didn't fit together compared to the year before when they did fit together? When you have a bad team and you're one of the top players at defender, it's really difficult because you try and do too much. You just do. These are alpha A1 athletes, and that's what they do. They try and do too much. And while zone entries aren't, even before that when the team was decent, weren't his forte, and they still won't be here. But when you look at the total package of him, when he has a good team around him, he's a top 8 defenseman in the NHL. He's a right shot, right side, 26-year-old defenseman that's obviously begging for a change of scenery to get out of there, and he ain't the first to ask for a ticket out of there. He's just the latest of a long list, going all the way back to Rick Nash. And, I mean, to me, like, I understand the mentality of Flyers fans, and there's a little bit of insecurity, I think, that stems from this, is, I don't want him. Let's find the warts on the supermodel. Because when the supermodel denies my request for a date, I won't be heartbroken. You know what I mean? I didn't want him, so I'm not going to really lose him if we don't get him. That's what we do. It's a self-protection mechanism. I don't want him because if we don't get him, I don't want to be heartbroken.
Yeah.
But I've got news for people. It's real. Like when Elliot Friedman says what he said the other day, I don't know if you guys saw it. I posted it. I posted the audio when he was on NHL Network Radio. And when Elliot Friedman says something like that, and I can read you the quote, just so for the people that didn't hear exactly what he said. He was on NHL Morning Skate with Scott Laughlin and Gord Stellick, and talking about Seth Jones, and that he wouldn't be surprised that, first of all, he reported, Elliot, that Seth Jones was not going to be staying in Columbus, and he said he was going to explore free agency. So here's what he said on NHL Morning Skate, which is what I put on Twitter. He said, I'm sure he would probably be very interested in going to a place like Dallas or Colorado because he's got attachments to those places. I just don't know if I see the fit. The one team I wonder about right now is Philly. A, they can do it, and B, I wonder how Jones feels about that. That's one of the teams I look at right now, and say I would not be shocked at all if he ends up there, referring to the Flyers. Now, Elliot Friedman does not, as you guys know, he does not just go willy-nilly and say something like that unless he's got serious intel. And let's face it, we know that Elliot gets very good intel. So this is not like some unfounded gut feeling that he pulled from the sky. He knows some things. Pierre LeBrun's talked about it as well. I had him on the podcast a couple weeks ago, and we talked about it. And Pierre LeBrun, same thing, does not put things like that out there unless he has heard a lot of chatter about it from reliable sources. So he is absolutely in play. And I would just say to people, too, the people that say, I don't want him, they can do better. Okay, maybe they can do better. Maybe they can get Dougie Hamilton, but you don't know if he's going to be available. And what I would say is, if you don't think they need him, then obviously your Zenith TV didn't show the games that I watched this year. They sure need him.
I mean, real quick follow-up. To me, and I've said this on Twitter, is he's the guy I think they're going to end up with. Like, I just think, and I don't know if the fact that his dad's an assistant coach with the Sixers makes a difference or not, but to me, it just seems like it's the one that makes the most sense out there, because I don't think Hamilton's going to come here, and, I don't see them trading for a Ryan Ellis or a Klingberg or a Dumba, but to me, it just seems like it makes the most sense. And I tend to, lean towards what you were saying from the talent perspective. One thing I would say is, like I said, he was in the bottom 10% of defensemen in the NHL this year with a lot of the analytics. Werenski was on the same team, and he was in the top 10%. So, I mean, that's
a lot of those do favor a play driver, though, when you're looking at that, too, like Werenski.
Yeah.
So there's no doubt about that.
The guy that I'm kind of hoping and thinking that they're probably going to end up with.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, my obvious preference is Hamilton. There's no cost per acquisition, and it's just straight up cash, right? And everything fits. But again, the variable of no control, of being able to know if he even gets to be available. I mean, I think he probably wants to stay in Carolina, in that situation. It's a good market. You don't have guys, when you're eating dinner, taking pictures of you, stuff like that. And it's a good market for him. He's going to get paid no matter where he goes. So it's not like he's going to stay there and not get paid. So, I mean, I like Ryan Ellis too, but he is older. There are elements of this, and Seth Jones is only 26. And I know that I will tell you this I do know. They want to solve the problem of the top pair, but they don't want to Band-Aid it like they were trying to do with Niskanen. That was all they could do at that point with Niskanen, and he had 3 years left, or 2 years from when they got him. They want to solve this problem, I don't want to say in perpetuity, but for the next 6 to 7 years, and have Ivan Provorov and whoever's alongside him there for a long time. And I think that both of their games will complement, like Seth Jones and Ivan Provorov fit together very well, if you ask me. Both of them have offensive tendencies. Both of them can play defense, and I think they can complement each other extremely well. Not to mention, there's not many guys in the league that can play as many minutes as each of them.
Well, that is one, and maybe I'm picking at nits. And one thing Allison Lucan was talking about with Charlie O'Connor was kind of like, he's almost like very similar to Provorov. Does he, he talked about Werenski being a play driver. It's almost like Sanheim would be a better fit because he's more of a play driver. Am I being too nitpicky there, or is that maybe a little bit of a thought?
Well, maybe on paper what you were just saying, I agree with, but I don't look at Sanheim as a top pairing guy. You know what I mean?
Right.
I look at from the minutes perspective and I need my top pairing to be really good. I mean, you have to have a really good top pairing. You do. And if you don't, you see what happened this year. You get your lunch handed to you because every team you play for the most part's got a really good top line. And while you may not be able to stop a top line every night, you can limit a top line. And they couldn't limit them this year at all. Yeah. And that's why those lines of the Perfection line, Ovechkin's line, the Zibanejad line, ate them for lunch all year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you also need a guy, like one of the things Niskanen did, guys, was he had this great – remember when he came here too? His analytics sucked before he got here, by the way.
Yep. Very similar.
They really did.
Yeah.
Yep. And so that's number one. Number two, he knew when to go out there and give you what I just call a really boring, quiet shift. The Flyers this year on 16 occasions, when they either scored a goal to get within one or tie a game, they gave up a goal within 2 minutes. They tied the Edmonton Oilers for doing it 16 times in a 56-game season.
Yeah.
Right? Niskanen was the guy that would go out after that and give you a really boring shift. And you know why? Nothing happened. The puck kind of went from the dots in your zone to the dots in their zone and didn't do a whole heck of a lot. Well, this year, it ended up in the back of their net on 16 occasions.
Mm-hmm.
You need those really quiet shifts. When a game and the other team's grabbing momentum and you need a really quiet shift, that's what Matt Niskanen gave them. They didn't have that this year.
A momentum killer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The game's all about it, right? I say it all the time. The game's about having momentum, doing everything you can to keep it. When you lose it, doing everything you can to get it back.
Yeah. He was a cooler out there in gambling parlance.
Mm-hmm.
There are some other players that you never know. There's so many variables, and like you said, the team's going to be more active. Some other names that have come up as possibilities besides Ellis, Hamilton, Jones, are players like we could revisit Ekholm, even though he's left-handed. You mentioned Savard, and then there's Adam Larson from Edmonton, who's probably provides less offense, but he is a pretty good defenseman. Would that be a real consolation prize, or do you think he could possibly be somebody who's kind of a quiet, good defensive player?
Yeah, I mean, it'll feel like a consolation prize, right? Especially to a lot of the fan base, because they don't know Adam Larson, they don't know the deal that he was in to go to Edmonton, and it'll feel like a huge letdown because, the people that don't really follow the league will be freaked out about it. They know most of them know who Seth Jones is, right?
Right.
But if it was Josh Manson, right, or Matt Dumba, they would kind of be like, who? Even though that, some of these players would fit with the Flyers, they're not on the frontal lobe of the fan base for the most part, unless you follow the league. But it'll feel like a consolation prize to a lot of people. It doesn't mean it's not the right move, I think they're going to shoot as high as they can go. I think they're going for big move, splash move, something to get this fan base excited. Sometimes I worry about that because you're doing it for the wrong reasons. You're not doing it for the right reasons. But I believe that those two things can, come together as, being the right move and a big move. It's time they get back into that echelon of excitement in this city, number one, and number two, the league, where they go out and they grab a player. Like, remember when they grabbed Pronger on draft night?
Yeah.
That was balls, right? I was on the air. I was working at WIP at the time. I told you how long ago it was. And I was on the air as it happened. And then, I found out about the deal. And then I get a text from Zach Hill. And he's like, do you want him on? I'm like, Pronger? He's like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, of course.
Duh.
I'm dumb and all, but I ain't that dumb. But yeah, it's time they get back to being looked at as one of those teams that's going to be involved for the biggest names and best talent in the league. And they're going to take that jump and become a team that is not only a playoff lock, but one that can do damage.
Yeah, absolutely. It's time that Flyers hockey really friggin' matters again. Hextall kind of cast a little bit of a pall, like you said, kind of maybe overcorrected things. It is time to kind of shake things up. The Flyers matter. Jim Boomer Gordon.
Better for the league when they do, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it's good for the league is right. He said the league is better when the Flyers are good, and I'm all for that. So we just found out, Jason, that Ian LaPerriere is now the new coach at Lehigh Valley, and I was going to ask you, what was behind the changes there? Is it just Chuck installing his guy after having a period of evaluation? And
I think that may be part of it. Scott Gordon was a guy that was hired by Hextall and was here a long time. I don't know. I texted with Scott a little bit after it happened. I get the sense that he's looking to try and get back on an NHL bench. Obviously, as a head coach, I don't think that's going to happen right now. But that wasn't happening here, and he wanted a bit more of a commitment. And it was very amicable. And he moves on, and they can put a guy like Ian LaPerriere there, who he's been here through multiple regimes, now 3. And he's a guy that, has been a really good player development guy for him. That's where he started, right? And he's a guy that can work with the kids, and system-wise, it'll be very consistent with what they're doing at the NHL level, and that's a big thing as well. Kind of getting the same message preached to you throughout your growth curve to the NHL. I think that's a big part of it, and he's going to get an opportunity now to coach him. And I texted him. He just congratulated him. He just got back to me a couple minutes ago, and he's really excited about it. And I'm going to talk to him tomorrow. It'll be on Wednesday's episode of Flyers Daily. But I think it's a good move, and I'm happy for Lappy that he's going to get the opportunity. I know he's been a bit of a punching bag here because of the PK in the years that he was running it, but it's a good move, I think, for the organization. I think he can really affect the young kids and their development, and he's not that far removed from playing. I think that's a big part of it too. He's not some guy that played back in wrapped up his playing career in 1987. He did 10 years ago. So I think young players respond to that. So congrats to him.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Good luck with the drive.
There's going to be a lot of moving parts now because, with the CHL opening back up, particularly the OHL, and you have slide rule with the contracts. So the Flyers are up against it right now. Dan, do you want to ask something about that? And, what's going to happen with these kids and perhaps maybe in Samuel Ursan?
Yeah, so I had a real quick LaPerriere question, and then I can dive into that. I was wondering, because, just what you kind of hear, and I don't know these guys, is that LaPerriere, as his role was sort of as the good cop kind of role. That's just, what you kind of hear that the players need to vent off some steam. They're upset about something that's going on, or one of the coaches, they go to him and he's kind of like, the good cop. They get along with him well. Is that, to me, wouldn't necessarily signal becoming a good head coach. Of course, I don't know if that's only because that's the role he's been asked to play, even if I don't even know if it's true that it is. But
from players, especially generationally. I mean, look, he played with he played with Giroux. So, him playing bad cop with Giroux wouldn't, not that it wouldn't work. You could do that, but it's different. There's a different kind of respect level and a way to play your cards. And a lot of times, the assistant coach is the guy that, doesn't do the yelling and screaming, but does the let me show you what coach is talking about type of thing. And that's part of the gig as an assistant coach, or how the coaching staff fits together. I don't know what kind of coach he'll be. I don't get the sense that he's going to be the good cop kind of coach as the head. He's a guy that wants to hold people to a very high level of accountability, and wants them to play the right way, whether you have skill or you don't have skill. And we know what he was as a player. And I think you can look in those kind of tips to see what he might be as a coach. A guy that had to do everything he could to stay in the league. And the one thing that you can control is you can always control effort. You can control, being physically fit and stuff like that. And those are things you can control. Not every player has equal levels of skill, but you can, control the controllable and let the other stuff fall where it falls. So I think that he'll be good in that regard. But I don't think that he's going to be. I mean, every coach now, to some extent, Dan, has become a player's coach, just because young athletes today aren't like they used to be. You have to be. You can't just tell them anymore. Now you have to show them. It's kind of the way it's been termed to me. So, even AV, even some of the old school coaches, Quenneville, they've all changed in some way. Because they have to be a young athlete now.
I know. I like hearing you say that. That makes me a little more excited about, the role for LePerriere there than I was previously. So that's good.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, even over the last decade though, Dan, you look at, even though they've made the playoffs every other year and it's been unacceptable, they have developed players. You know what I mean? Like this year, a lot of guys seem to regress because the team was horrible. But they have done a good, Konechny developed nicely, Provorov developed nicely, Sanheim developed nicely. You can go up and down. There's very few guys that fall into the Nolan Patrick category right now.
Yeah. So sort of along that lines and what Isaiah was mentioning, it looked obviously they're going to have to find a way to clear salary, but to make moves, they're also going to have to rely on some of these young guys on some of the entry level contracts for next year. As Isaiah mentioned, they signed Samuel Ersson, despite the fact that he's my favorite of the goalie prospects in the system. I mean, I certainly don't think that he's going to see a lot of NHL time next year, and I don't think that signing him will impact their decision at all on who they're going to have to sign as a backup to Hart. To me, the only two guys to me, I guess maybe three. I'd say three guys that, based on the way that they played this year, would give me confidence going into next year that they could add into the roster on a nightly basis. Are obviously Wade Allison. I think Lazinski could be a third, fourth line guy, probably fourth line guy, and I think Cam York might be able to grab a third pairing spot, although he might start in the AHL. But aside from that, even though Morgan Frost, who I've been a huge fan of, I haven't seen enough of him at the NHL level to prove to me that you could pencil him in as a third line center. What are your thoughts on which of these guys that weren't on the team that much this year could be contributors on these entry level contracts, and which are some of the guys on the borderline that you think they might just have to take a risk because of the salary situation they're in?
Yeah, I mean, I think two of the guys you brought, Wade Allison, I think that's a foregone conclusion, right?
Yeah.
I think Wade, even though most of the games he played in didn't mean much because they were basically out of the playoff picture, but I think that he's shown it off. And they knew it even before he played those games that he would be a guy that was going to really push. And I think that him being on the roster is pretty much a foregone conclusion as a bottom six, player for them. And then I look at Lazinski's interesting. You got to wonder what they're going to do about Albay Kubel because I think he had a really bad year. I really did not like his season. So, I mean, maybe that's the spot where Lazinski goes, and obviously Raffles not here anymore. So that's, another available spot there. But you're right about Frost. I mean, Frost hasn't even seen enough of Frost. He's played a game in a period since the pandemic began, 20 months ago or whatever?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy. So what we haven't seen is what he looked like before he got injured, both in the bubble as one of the black aces, if you will, and then this year in camp and in practice before he got into games. So that's information we don't have, and they do. But I think that he could obviously, pending again what happens with Nolan Patrick and desperation and stuff, I think that it's more likely that he starts with the Phantoms. And I think it's more likely that Cam York starts there as well. Cam looked good in the 2 games that he played. But yeah, I mean, if you get to a point where you can get him up and he's in the right position as a third pairing defenseman, and maybe, he's on your power play, depending who you get as a top pair right guy. And if Ghost is here, then maybe he's the third pair power play guy. Yeah, I could see that happening. I don't think Ghost will be back. So I think that's a likely spot for a guy like Cam York. I mean, it was 2 games. I loved what I saw out of him. He's just so calm with the puck, right? Like so deliberate and calm and just never looked overwhelmed. And I love, I watched him in World Junior. I watched him at Michigan, and he was such a great player. So many great players on that Michigan team. So I think that he's a guy that could, but I think it's more likely that he starts there and kind of, puts them in a position where they have to call him up. Right.
He's got to earn it. Right. Chef?
Since we were talking about injuries, Kevin Hayes, how I know they were saying minor surgery, but I've had core surgery. It's not fun. And I kind of suspected something was wrong just the way he was moving up to that point. I guess the question is, how realistic is he going to be back to a Kevin Hayes that we liked? Because I know based off of past performances from other players with these core surgeries, you're talking like maybe 6 months to a year to actually get your mojo back. And should they have shut him down earlier, knowing this?
I think it's very rare that you shut a guy down for something like that. You kind of play through it. And I think they wanted him to play through it as well. And I mean, look, I don't even know when they knew of the severity of it, that he needed surgery. Maybe it's not that severe. He just needs to, it was the early stages of, I guess, a sports hernia core surgery. So I don't know all that information, but when Giroux came back after his, he had a double. So that's different, right? Yeah. And you saw like dealing with the double, and I had talked to him at the time. It was really hard for him to open up his body. Gostisbehere, the same thing. He shot wide more that year than you can imagine. Why? Because he couldn't open up his body. So it does take a little bit of time to break down that scar tissue. I think Elliott had something similar as well and talked about that. It's a little different for a goalie in the way you move, but there could be a little bit of a period of breaking down scar tissue, and trust me, that's not fun. I had an inguinal hernia. That was a severe one that I had fixed, and I'm just playing beer league, and coming back from it was difficult. Once you get back from it, though, and you get the confidence in it, it's stronger than ever. But it's just getting to that point.
Yeah, I had that experience myself. I had a double.
Yeah, you've the guy you've mentioned a couple of times, and certainly something that we've talked about a lot on this show is Nolan Patrick. And what I wanted to ask you about is because I'm not his biggest fan, and I don't think any of the Isaiah and Chef, not his biggest fans. But this week was the first time that I've heard rumblings of stuff like, oh, he doesn't want to be here, all this kind of stuff. But because I guess Anthony Sanfilippo, went on the show with Anthony DeMarco, who's on this show sometimes, and basically, said, I've heard that Nolan is not happy. He's, he doesn't want to be here. He doesn't like Elaine Vigneault. And of course, Anthony wrote it up into an article, Anthony DeMarco. And it got a lot of waves around the league. People, writing these articles saying, "Oh, it's been confirmed. His agent's going to ask for a trade." And to me, it's all kind of just based on what Anthony Sanfilippo said, which there's not really anything of substance other than that he's saying that. So I'm kind of interested in, what is your take? What have you heard? Like, do you think his agent's going to ask for a trade?
I think his agent's probably already inquired about it, to be honest with you. I don't know that, but I tend to believe Ant's reporting a lot of times. I think he's pretty plugged in. And look, does it shock you? I mean, look at the body language of the player. Does it look like he wanted to be here?
No, I don't think he does, but I've just never seen it. This was the first week that's come out, and it's not like it was a quote from his agent. It was just sort of, information. So
yeah, his agent doesn't want to put it out that way because then it puts the Flyers in a position, right?
Well, they're sort of in it now, though, because
you don't want to put it out there on the record, is what I'm saying. You want it out there because you want teams picking up the phone to call Chuck Fletcher to say, "Hey, is he available?" So you want it out there. I mean, I always, when I'm looking at information, I go, okay, where's the upside to this being public? Where's the rub here? Who does it benefit if this information got out? And it benefits one person, the agent and the player. Like I said, it's two people. But it benefits them because they're the ones that want out. So they want teams to start calling the Flyers. How do you do that? You get that information out there via a reporter to put that information out that, hey, we're probably going to ask for a trade. And you have a little bit of ambiguity to it. And it goes out there that way. That way, I mean, Chuck's not dumb, though. Like, he knows where this stuff comes from. Everybody does. And it gets out there, and then now all of a sudden you're fielding phone calls about a player that, you look at his situation, go, hey, he didn't have a good year. His value's down. Number 2 overall pick. He's 22 years old. Why? They're probably not going to move him, right? Well, now all of a sudden teams go, oh, he's available. Let's inquire. Because every team and every general manager and every head coach, there's an arrogance that comes into play here. They all go, he was a number 2 overall pick. I can fix him. Didn't work there. They didn't know what to do with him. We know what to do with him. That's what they say, right?
Right.
Let's hope you're right.
Look at the player. Look at the skill set he has. I mean, he is a skilled hockey player. I'll get out of him what I need. I'll get that compete level out of him because that's what I do. I'm a head coach. That's what they say. Until you can't get that.
Now, speaking to the arrogance of GMs, is Chuck smart enough or arrogant enough to sit there and go, hey, maybe I'll get something before the draft or before he becomes a free agent or something along those lines? Do you think he gets moved?
Well, he's not
before
that.
He's restricted.
Yeah, he's restricted. Yeah. They have control of him. So, look, I think Chuck's going to go, I'm not going to give you away. If somebody wants to come with a serious offer, I'll listen to it. I think the most likely scenario is that he's part of some sort of package. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he was in a Seth Jones deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they need a center.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that Columbus would want to take a shot on another guy who's rumors about being disgruntled with a team, especially since the rumors are he wants to go back and play in Western Canada.
Yeah, that's really limiting to a head general manager, though, right? I go, I'm not like, what did you do to earn for me to send you where you want to go? Yeah. I'd look at that and go, okay, then maybe we'll send you there. Then come in for the first half of the season, get in shape, and play really well so I can get something for you in return, and then I can grant your request and try and trade you to that team for Kyle Connor, right? In the meantime, pipe down,
Yeah, definitely agree. Hey, it's just a couple more from you, Jason. Felix Sandstrom, is he done with the signing of Ursan and that Ustimenko coming back?
No, the East Coast League's going to come back in. Somebody will go there and get some time. Sandstrom had a little bit better of a year once he kind of started to adjust to the smaller surface over here. He another guy too that just hasn't played a lot with the pandemic and everything. Hasn't seen a lot of ice, and once he kind of got into a little bit of a rhythm this year, he put in some pretty good performances. So I don't know that he's done. I think that he's a guy that somebody's going to end up, playing in the coast, and it may be him.
Gotcha. So the Flyers draft pick, they're going to draft 13th overall. Arizona had to forfeit their pick because of Chaika.
I don't know that they're going to draft there. That's where they're slated to draft.
Right, exactly. Well, that was my question. They moved up because of Chaika's shenanigans. Well, does it seem like this is a year where there's so much controversy? Like, Flair is saying, "Oh, this could be, we got our guys on it. We think we can mine for some really good talent this year." But on the other hand, it is a bit of a crapshoot because of the way the leagues went. So if any year you're going to trade your first round pick, this would seem to be that year.
Well, maybe not though. I mean, if you do feel like you have a really good handle on it, and you're holding yourself truly accountable, then this could also be a year where you get a steal at 13, right?
Yeah.
It kind of goes both ways. There's an unknown variable to it, but if you feel like and you do actually know, then that could be even more valuable to you with all those variables you just mentioned, like the OHL, not playing this year and not getting eyes on guys and as often as you would like or at all for some of these guys. So, yeah, I mean, you can look at it both ways, but I don't think that they'll. Again, I think that Chuck's going to be very aggressive this offseason, and I think part of that aggressiveness is going to see them parting away with a first-round draft pick, which is something they have not done a whole heck of a lot of, which is, by the way, a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good thing, but if there was ever a time, it would be now. Like you said, you want to be relevant again. This is getting old. But
yeah, and that's just another piece of the puzzle that they haven't traded away first-round picks and draft picks that they use as what I've kind of termed as organizational currency. You have draft picks. You got a ton of them. You have prospects that aren't in the NHL yet or playing pro. You have prospects that are. You have young players. You have all that. Those are all organizational currency to help reshape and reset a roster properly.
Yep, absolutely. So last one from me, Jason. The NHL playoffs. Impressions? Any surprises? Anything stand out? And how are your predictions holding up so far?
Well, I picked the Canadiens to win the North in my preseason predictions, and it looks like I'm going to be right. Because I just thought they were the only team that could play defense, and turns out they are the only team that can play defense. But they've been wild, man. Seeing fans back in these buildings, like in Vegas the other night in a full barn, and what's been going on on Long Island at Nassau County Coliseum, and it's just been so awesome to watch. I mean, the games have been great. The hockey has been awesome. I mean, from the first game again, right? It was Tampa and who they play in the first round? I'm like brain dead.
Florida.
But like the first game, yeah. I mean, remember game one? It was like a throwback to '91.
It was unbelievable. The intensity was unreal.
Yeah. I mean, imagine what it'd be like if you're going to get a Colorado and Tampa final. Think about that. The skill and speed and the grit that's out there and the goaltending in that series would be unbelievable. So it's been great. I mean, I've enjoyed it so much. I'm watching it every night, and that's all I do. I mean, geez, I'd watch anybody play hockey for the most part. At all levels, I do. Like, I go to the rink when they have like a U16 showcase. Like how pathetic is that? But I just love the game and watching it at that level and the way these teams are playing. I mean, when the game's played properly, it's such a beautiful sport, right?
Yeah.
I just want that to happen here again. It's because I want these people to be exposed to that the way we were when we were younger, and be entertained by it year in and year out. And that just hasn't happened, but I've loved it, man. And like, even though we're going to get the cup handed out way later than normal, like a month later, like I already have a sense of dread about it. Like I'm already dreading. I always hate when they hand out the cup because it means you're in the off season, and there's not going to be any hockey of relevance for months. This year it's going to be shorter, and there's a lot of business to take care of in the off season.
Which will be fun.
Yeah, it will be guys, I think there's going to be so much movement this offseason because basically last year there was none, and you have this certainty of the TV contract now coming and all that.
Yeah.
So I think that it's going to be an exciting offseason. Look at their division. They'll be back to the Metro next year. All the variables. Brindamore, Dougie Hamilton. Ovechkin's a free agent, for God's sake. They got knocked out in the first round again with Peter Laviolette. They got Kuznetsov, who they're sick and tired of his bullshit. Samsonov really floundered in the playoffs. Pittsburgh didn't get any goaltending from Tristan Jarry. Malkin and Letang can be extended. Will they be, or will somebody be moved? I think they'll both stay. But, major question marks in this division. Columbus, who's going to be the coach? The Islanders, can they continue to sustain? The Rangers with Shesterkin and Zibanejad, and they fired Quinn. Is Tocchet going to be their coach? And
right.
Look at all these variables that I'm just talking about the division. I'm not even talking about teams like Toronto. What are they going to do? What's Edmonton going to do, who got knocked out? LA's got all these organizational assets. Is Eichel? Where's Eichel going to?
Yeah.
Think about it. Is Taylor Hall staying in Boston? Like, holy shit.
It's a ton. Between the storylines that you're talking about and the natural pent-up demand from last year, it's going to be like an earthquake, man. Forget it.
Yep. It's going to be cataclysmic, the movement that takes place in the NHL this offseason. And, the Devils, too, are they going to finally get aggressive? It is crazy what's gonna happen. I think this and an expansion draft to boot.
Yeah.
Yeah. All that jammed into 1 week too. Everything's jammed into 1 week. It's going to be awesome.
Think about this part of it too. Calgary has got to make some serious moves. I think they're sick and tired of being sick and tired, kind of like us.
Yeah.
Is that a trade partner for the Flyers? I think it makes sense. And there's a local kid in Calgary, obviously, Johnny Hockey, who everybody's always wanted. I don't know if he makes them better or not. I don't know if he's a great playoff player or not. But that would provide excitement, wouldn't it?
Well, it certainly helps their power play, that's for sure.
Think about it. If Voracek's not taken in the expansion draft and they take JVR, could you see a deal where, like, Ghost and Voracek end up in Calgary and you end up with Johnny Hockey and something else? I could.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, just for clearing alone. Yeah, and who is going to be the heir apparent on the power play to Giroux? And that's where Goudreau would be a natural, at least in that regard. So,
well, think about that part of it. You just brought it up. Couturier and Giroux are entering the final years of their deal.
Yeah.
Talk about like monumental.
Well, this is it. This is that junction spot. This is that point where they have to decide how relevant are we going to be before we make a big decision and commit all that money to Couturier. And, what kind of deal can we work out with Giroux for him to remain a Flyer, if indeed that's the direction they want to go. One storyline after another.
I think the Couturier part of it is the most fascinating because I think Couturier is using this year to say, do I want to stay? Are we going to compete for a cup? So what they do this offseason will determine whether he wants to be here or not as well. I think it's fascinating. And when you got guys like Eichel available and all of those variables, I think he just – look, the one guy we haven't even talked about, and I'm stunned. We haven't talked about Carter Hart.
Yeah. Well, people are just assuming that he's just going to bounce back. That's the basic assumption of most fans.
Yeah, I think some believe that. I think there are some that go, he's just another one of those guys that came along, was decent at the start, and we're going to still have that same problem. I am not one of those guys. I don't believe that. I think a year like he just had is very normal. It's very normal. It's abnormal if a young goaltender of his age doesn't go through that. It's hard, though. Most goaltenders his age don't go through that at the NHL level, which is even more unforgiving. When you struggle and you're in the NHL as a goaltender and you're 22, man, that is as unforgiving as it gets. Because those guys, when you are struggling, you make yourself smaller, you feel smaller, you sink in your net a little bit more. They just make you pay. You can't overcome it, right? And I think that was part of the equation. And how could any goaltender of any generation, and I'm talking the greats, Hasek, Waugh, Marty Brodeur, you name it, Cujo, who could have overcome that defense this year?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. I mean, you guys saw the pictures on Twitter people put out. 5 guys flooded to one side of the ice to cover 2 players from the opposition. Like, what is going on here?
Yeah, I mean, Hasek is the only guy who he was like Mr. Desperation Mode on every save, but he's the only player that was able to cover up. I mean, to me, he's the best I've ever seen, but that's just, one man's opinion, but it's crazy.
Yeah, I don't put him as the best I've ever seen. He may be. The only reason I don't do that, because as a goalie, I could never relate to him. Like, you see goalies and you see elements of their game, you go, oh, I love those elements, and you try and incorporate them into your own game or your own play reading ability and all that stuff. And they make sense. Like, it makes sense. Like, Marty did this and Brodeur, and that makes sense. Like, okay, the way he would hold his edges and stay on his feet, or, the way that he played the puck, or Hexie played the puck, or you watch, a guy like Jonathan Quick, and you go, okay, I can see on anything dead angle from the hash marks and down below the line to be in an RVH. That makes sense because you're playing percentages. But watching like Hasek, it was like nothing ever made sense. It just made saves. But I could never figure out his mindset to why he would go and do the things he did. They made no sense. And I think they just confused shooters and they would just hit him with the puck. Because like, what the is he doing? Like, the dude's doing I'm coming in on a breakaway and he just did a barrel roll. Like, what am I supposed to do?
He is the most frustrating.
How do I know where to shoot the puck when I don't even know where he's going?
I know. He's the most frustrating goalie I've ever rooted against in 50-plus years. I've just never seen anything like him.
Well, he competed his balls off too, right?
Yeah,
I mean, every good goalie. And but kind of back to Hart, he's never going to be the guy that's going to throw a barrel roll at you. He's very structured. Right. But I think he needs a really good summer of working on the technical aspects of his game. And I texted with him a little bit, and he's going to get back on the ice probably in the next 3 weeks. Start working on some movements, let the mind recover and all that stuff, the emotional recovery, and then he'll get back on the ice, start working with his goalie coaches, and work on those technical elements of his game, and because they're the key for him. They're as a goalie, it's really hard, guys, because like elite athletes, it's really difficult for a goalie that's an elite athlete because you don't have control. You're in a reactionary position. You're always reacting to everything or your surroundings. You dictate the terms so little as a goalie that it's tough. Like I've always said this. I think that a lot of goalies end up being OCD because of that. Because they don't have control on the ice, so they control like Dan, this, you're at games all the time. That Carter controls every minute of game day until he gets on the ice and he has no control. Like every minute of his game day routine, you cannot mess with it. He's rolling out.
And sometimes you've got to break away from that though to
you become a prisoner
at some point. I mean, starting pitchers are the same way in baseball. I mean, some of these guys break into the league and they just, when the days that they're starting, everything has to go perfectly. They'll meditate before the game and envision how things are going to go. And sometimes you're part of having better experience in the games is not being quite so rigid outside of the games, even though that rigidity and structure is probably part of what got you to the point you are, but you need to kind of keep evolving.
Yeah, at one, I forget who it was. I was listening to talking about that. It was on the In-Goal Radio podcast, and he was like, eventually I had to just stop doing it because it became so much more about the rigidity of my game day that I wasn't actually preparing for the game anymore. I was just making sure everything was perfect on game day and by timing on everything. And eventually you become, for lack of a better term, a slave to it, and it's not preparing you for the game. It's causing you more anxiety and stress, worrying that everything's done exactly the same every day. But a lot of that, though, is too, that's the alpha athlete going, I have to control. And because when you get into a game as a goalie, again, it's you're just reacting to your surroundings, and you can influence what happens. And I'll show you a little bit more on glove side, knowing I'm just going to take it away. But that's very little that you're actually influencing in that regard.
Well, if any consolation, to look back and see that, Carey Price had the same problems in his second and third years, but
so did Fleury.
Yeah, and wow, how he's been amazing in these playoffs. It's like watching him the other night. It was amazing.
It's a master class. Watching him is a master class in the position. I don't think that, and I talked about this after they played Montreal last year. And I mentioned it to Carter when I had him on Flyers Daily. I said, the most impressive part about watching you in the playoffs against Montreal, you're playing against Price, which is his idol, which is another element of the equation. But I said the most impressive part is that it looked like your heart rate never went over 72. Like you were calm the whole time, never overwhelmed, not spazzing, just playing your game, controlling what you can control. And you watch Carey, and I know that somebody tweeted out, maybe it was Craig Button, said that when they were in the Olympics one year, I think it was 2014, he said during a TV timeout, Price was playing in a 1-goal game, and he was over at the bench getting some water, and he yawned. And he was like that's how calm he was. It was like the gold medal game for Team Canada, right? And you guys know what that means up there. And he yawned.
It's everything.
Like the guy is so chill. Like he's the master class of the position from the technical standpoints to the compete standpoints to the mentality of putting what already happened behind you, learning from it, but not letting it affect you going forward. It's amazing. And the good thing, Carter has a lot of those, and Kerry did go through something very similar. And I talked to Michel Therrien, and he said that he went to Kim Dillaball during the season and said, do you mind if I talk to Carter? Because I was with Kerry when he was 21, 22, 23, all the way through to when he was a Hart Trophy winner, and talk about that experience. And Mike Therrien and Carter talked about that. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
So, another guy that went through it was Vasilevsky when he first came in. Like, he was a huge prodigy, right? And then he struggled a bit, but eventually they figured it out. You got to go through success at the NHL level is not a straight line. There's peaks and valleys. Very few guys are Connor McDavid or Sidney Crosby. And even Crosby had some, adversity. McDavid's had some adversity. It happens. It's what you do with it that matters the most. And I think he'll bounce back fine. Like, damn, I can't wait for the season to start already.
Yeah, it's not even done yet.
I want answers to I want to skip to the last chapter of the book to know who they signed, who's here, who's not here, all of that. Like, I geek out over the backup goalie, whoever that's going to end up being, right?
Yeah.
I can't wait for it. It's going to be such a fascinating offseason. I just hope it's fascinating. We get to that 3-week period where there's nothing happening and everybody's recharging, and then you start to see players coming back to get on the ice a couple weeks in advance of camp and pick up games, and we'll see if I get a call to tend some net in some of those pickup games again, but it'll be awesome.
Yeah. Between July 17th, when the protection lists have to be submitted, and July 28th, when UFA signing begins, you got all that activity going on. So,
Jay, you used to have like 7 weeks of nothing happening.
Right.
Now we're going to have about a month, but it'll be leading up to an 82 again, right? And a normal schedule. We'll have a break in the season because of the Olympics. We'll have like an 18-day break, which will be cool in February. Fly down to Cabo or something. I don't know. But yeah, I can't wait for it to get started. I can't wait to see what ESPN and TNT do too. So there's another element.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Jason, man, this has been really great. I think we've hit them all the points that we were looking to cover tonight. So, brother, where can people find your work? You got a show coming out tomorrow on the Flyers Daily podcast. What else?
Yeah, we're doing Flyers Daily right now, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. When we get around the draft, we'll probably ramp up to 5 days a week again, and then go back into a semi-hibernation mode. I mean, I've done already this year, I think I've done probably 170 episodes. It's crazy, just every day. So, we'll have one tomorrow. I'll have Ian LaPerriere on Wednesday's episode, the new head coach of the Lehigh Valley Phantoms, which will be great. So you can check out Flyers Daily, and then also on Twitter at Jason Myrt, JASONMYRT, and that's about all I'm doing. I'm in off-season mode too, boys.
Well,
I'm recovering.
You've been busy, man. We see you
deserve
around.
it, man.
You deserve it, right?
Yeah.
Well, dude, I'm on the shelf too. Like we're in our beer league final, and I missed game 1 out injured. I'm going to miss game 2 tomorrow night. We won game 1 anyway, but I hurt my back folding a sheet.
folding a sheet. Oh.
Oh my God! I hope you didn't tell your teammates that. You got to bring in Mr. Miyagi to fix that.
I talked about it on the radio. I was snapping the sheet out to fold it, and I whipped it behind my head, and I pulled my face to the floor. So I have a huge C4, C5 problem right now, and an MRI on Thursday. It was 3 weeks ago.
Oh my God!
Yeah, I'm a total mess. But I have the Flyers E-Bug playing for me tomorrow night. Justin Kowalkowski, who played at Colgate, he's the Flyers E-Bug. So he's filling in for me tomorrow night. So he's better give me a good performance.
I hope you feel better soon.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, we got to sweep the Boobies.
Yeah.
That's the team we're playing, the Boobies.
Huh? Yeah, keep him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, New York Rangers have fired Gerard Gallant as their new head coach, boys.
Okay. You got a breaking news.
What's that?
Gerard Gallant.
I was
Is he coming in on a taxi, or what, how's that going to work out?
Yeah, they're going to get him a car service.
He's a good hire. He gets off to a good start. I don't know about the rest of the way, but I think he's probably the right guy for that team.
Yeah, we'll see. I think he's a good coach.
Yeah.
By the way, there'll be an availability coming up on Monday with Chuck Fletcher and Ian LePerriere as well. So
Okay. Yeah, we're covering it to the very end. Jay, man, thanks a lot. Thanks again.
awesome, guys. I appreciate it. You guys do great work. I'll be listening, and everybody enjoy the off season. And when you guys need me, I'm always there.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it
Jay.
so much.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks, man.
Right.
Thanks, boys.
Right. Take care. Okay, so it's just Chef and I. Dan had the role as well as Jason. You can catch Dan at dsilver88 on Twitter, at dsilver88 on Twitter. And Chef, now's a good time that Dan's left because he hated when I tell people about Jim South Street. I mean, don't get me wrong. He'd love to hear it, but he's down in D.C. He couldn't make it up there. And you really, if you want the cheesesteak for 4 decades in the grandest tradition of Philly cheesesteaks, you got to go to Jim South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia, with or without, doesn't matter. And if you live down there at 400 South Street, but you can't make it over, don't worry. They work with DoorDash. That delicious steak, hoagie, those fries will make it to you right to your door. So just remember, Jim South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia, PA. And with that, Chef, why don't you give your info before we close out there?
Yeah, you can reach me on Twitter at Chef to the left B, Chef, the number 2 to the left B.
Excellent. And of course, I can be reached Isaiah, ISAIAH _520, Isaiah _520. And if you could follow or subscribe, whatever platform you're on, for the O&B Puckcast, it's really appreciated. And give us a rating. Again, it moves us up the charts when people are looking for Philadelphia Flyer podcasts. And of course, you can follow our Facebook page and on Twitter at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck. So, hey, jam-packed show tonight. So until next time, everybody, take care.